All right, I'm here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us on a Monday. It's a new week. My name is Josh. This is the JMULL show. Listen, I don't know about you, but at the end of Game 7 of the NLCS last night, part of me felt like the Braves should have won that game fairly easily. And the box scores don't necessarily represent that. I mean, Atlanta only had 3 hits in the ball game, and it's kind of hard to believe that they should have won this game when the Dodgers had 10. The Dodgers certainly left a lot of runs out there, but there are a lot of specific situations to point to with the Dodgers when it comes to, with the Braves when it comes to why maybe they should have won that game. But we'll get to that here in a few minutes. Let me set the agenda for you. Our resident 110 sports baseball expert, Mr. Chris Brown. He'll be here at about 11:20 or so to talk about the NLCS. We'll briefly touch on the World Series. I don't want to put him in too tough of a position. Last night was the end of the NLCS, so I don't want him to be in a position where he hasn't spent a ton of time researching yet. So we'll tread lightly, but we'll of course get into the beginnings of talking about the World Series with him at about 11:20 or so. I got some Week 6 of the NFL season observations to make. If you would humor me for a moment, that'll be in about 40 minutes or so, and then we'll get out of here with some FYI on a Monday and get ready for the rest of the week. But of course, we have to start with the biggest sporting event yesterday, at least in my opinion. I'm sure there were multiple football games that warranted more attention than Game 7, the NLCS, but Dodgers complete the 3-1 comeback with a 4-3 win in Game 7, the NLCS, and like I said, I'm not sure they should have won this baseball game. It started really rocky for the Dodgers. First of all, I mean, Dustin May on the mound, clearly there to throw an inning. 8 straight balls to start the game. 8 pitches, 2 walks to Freddie Freeman and Ronald Acuna. And then Marcell Ozuna steps up, drives in a run. Like that, 1-0. No outs, and you only get 1. Dustin May, the very next batter, double play, and then he gets another strikeout to end the inning, and it's only 1-0, and you felt like right there that the Dodgers are not in as big of a hole as they should have been right out of the gates. And that was only the beginning. Then they're up 3-2 with no outs, with runners on second and third. This is the top of the 4th inning. You get 2 guys on base quickly, and then Riley drives in a run to go up 3-2, and then you got guys on first and second, Riley on first, Dansby Swanson on second, and then you get a wild pitch, and you got runners on second and third with no outs. 3-2 ball game. You think you've got to really mess up here to not get any. A ground ball to the right side of the infield, that's a run. A ground ball hit not all that well to anybody, chance to be a run. A sac fly, that's a run. A single, and you're up 5-2. And instead, you get this just horrible sequence of events. It's really interesting, though. If you watch the game, you know what I'm talking about. A ground ball hit really hard at the third baseman. I think it was Justin Turner there. It might have been Corey Seager. But a really hard hit ground ball to the left side of the infield, and they go right home with it. And Dansby Swanson didn't even look before he started running. And then the Dodgers did it later in this game. And the Braves were able to throw, I can't remember who it was, out at home. I believe it was Chris Taylor. I believe. But But just look to see where the guy might be throwing the baseball. Yeah? The Dodgers made this mistake, but clearly the bigger mistake, because of it turned into a double play, was the Braves base running in the 4th inning of this game. Hard hit ground ball. Just take a peek. Even if you're taking a couple steps forward, just take a peek to see what's happening. He didn't even take a peek. He goes sprinting, the ball gets to home plate, and he's barely halfway there. Just over halfway, maybe. But he's barely there. Has to turn around and run back. And not only does Dansby Swanson get tagged out, and first of all, Justin Turner barely got Dansby Swanson. He actually ended up getting him twice, I think. He got him on like the back of the leg with the dive, and then again like on the bottom of the foot, it looked like. So he definitely got him. But he dove out like that instead of making the throw to the guy at home plate. And he barely got him. So that was almost a disastrous situation for the Dodgers. But he gets him, has the presence of mind to get up quickly, roll over onto his back and make a throw to Corey Seager, who's covering the bag at third. And get Austin Riley, who's just was sort of out in no man's land over there between second and third. He got halfway to third and then then turned back, and he was going to go back, but then he saw Justin Turner on the floor, and so he turns around and goes back, and then ends up, he was almost safe, first of all. He actually ended up almost being safe, because he sort of moved his right leg way out to the right, and his left foot almost got to the bag before Corey Seager applied the tag. But just in a game 7 like that, you just can't make base running mistakes like that. And if you're gonna make base running mistakes, just at least let it be one guy. At least let it be one, right? If you're the guy behind a guy who's in the pickle, the guy in the pickle is probably going to get out. Just commit to getting to third base. Because even if Dansby Swanson is out, you've still got runners on the corners with one out. And then you've still got an opportunity for a sac fly. Of course, a base hit scores a run. You've still got chances in this inning. Instead, Riley and Swanson turn it into a pretty easy double play for Justin Turner. Once he gets that tag, and it's not even all that close at third base, and then all of a sudden you've got 2 outs with a guy on first. And the rookie Pache coming up to hit. That's not exactly what you want. And it looked like another inning. Albies got on again and then stole a base. It was working out the exact same way the first inning worked out. Acuna gets on. Freeman walks. Ozuna hits one in. Gets a runner home. Those 2 innings, I mean, they ended up getting 1 run between those 2 innings, and they should have gotten at least 3. They just didn't get the timely hitting that they needed. And in a game like this against the Dodgers, where runs are going to be so hard to come by, you can't make those silly mistakes. You just can't. And they just sort of let the Dodgers hang in there, and it was 3-2 for so much longer than it should have been. Three to 2, and you just sort of, and then you let the Dodgers stick around. You get some good innings in the middle from Gonsolin, and we'll get to Urias here in a second, but they just sort of let him keep hanging around, and you know that 3 runs isn't going to get it done against the Dodgers almost ever. They're going to hit home runs at one point. They hit 16 home runs in this series, which is laugh out loud funny. That's so many home runs. And then there are some unlucky parts of this game, like the fact that Mookie Betts makes his, the 3rd catch in the last 3 games that would seriously be considered as one of the best catches of the year. robbed 2 home runs. Now, the catch he made in Game 6 wasn't going to be a home run because of where he was on the wall, but it was an incredible catch. And Freddie Freeman's hit in this game was going to be a home run if he doesn't rob that one. So you get unlucky there. That's not really a mistake that the Braves make, but there are a couple instances in this game, specifically the way they started the first and fourth innings. Swanson hits the hardest home run of his career, again off Gonsolin to start the second inning. And he thought, man, I mean, Dustin May was really shaky. Gonsolin gives up a homer right away. Clearly this, and then Gonsolin settles down a little bit and they're able to get through the game a little bit deeper with him than it initially looked like they might be able to. Training comes in, Gratterall comes in, and then Urias throws 3 at the end of this game to just absolutely be lights out. Absolutely lights out. I was really happy with Dave Roberts' decision to not go with somebody else. Jensen, Kershaw. I thought, Urias was lights out. He had been. And I think he deserved a chance to end that game, and there was no reason to suggest that he wasn't going to be able to end the game. I was surprised that Kershaw didn't get into this game. I thought that if you're going to put Dustin May on the mound to only throw 1 inning of work on even shorter rest than Kershaw, why not throw Kershaw out there? Now, May bounced back really nicely from the really shaky start. He only threw 1 inning, and it looked like he was going to give up several runs and was able to get out of it, so props to him. If what you were wanting out of the guy starting on the mound was 1 inning, I mean, Kershaw was good through the first time through the batting order against the Braves. He got rocked in the second time around, but he was good first time around. So I thought that Kershaw was a little bit safer of a pick if you're really just going for 1 inning. But then again, now you've got a completely rested Clayton Kershaw to start Game 1 of the World Series. We can argue if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's true nonetheless. And he's still Clayton Kershaw. But I walked away from this game feeling like the Braves left at least 2 runs on the board. And then you get Kiki Hernandez, who comes in and hits a bomb to tie the game. And in the bottom of the 7th, Cody Bellinger struts away from a home run in a way that I maybe have never seen somebody strut away from a home run. I've seen better bat flips, of course, at Jose Bautista. But he just strutted out, absolutely smoked that 94-mile-an-hour pitch. That was right down the middle. Clearly, it was supposed to be a little more up in the zone than it ended up being. It ended up being, somewhere between the belly button and the chest. And he just never a doubt. We do need to relax with the whole, elbow thing that baseball players do. You know what I'm talking about? After the game, Cody Bellinger said that he popped it out. Hopefully he doesn't have shoulder issues in the World Series because of a celebration. I can't remember who it was. It was an Angels player at the beginning of a season. He had a walk-off home run. I can't remember who it was, but he jumped on home plate with his teammates and tore his ACL, broke his ankle, something. It was out for the season, just like that. Bellinger said he had to go back to the training room right after the home run and get his shoulder popped back into place. Now, he made a catch, I think it was the first out of the top of the 8th, and then threw it back into, he made a catch. I believe it was his, I think it was his right shoulder. I'm not sure, though. Either way, he looked fine out in the field after that, so I don't think it's going to be too big of an issue, but come on, dude. Just relax a little bit with the celebration. Dodgers complete this comeback, and the biggest thing I have, the biggest takeaway I had here was, now that we're in the World Series, it's a 60-game season. It's a weird season. Everything that's happened since, March with baseball and this different playoff format. You get the two best teams in baseball left in the World Series. That, in my opinion, is a successful postseason. We got pretty close to it being an issue. I mean, the Astros, a losing baseball team, almost made the comeback, and a controversial one at that. But at the end of the day, we have the Rays and the Dodgers, the two best teams in each league, far and away, throughout the regular season in the World Series, and two baseball teams that could not be more different. I mean, one team that spends an obscene amount of money, the other team, you can't talk about them in a broad context without talking about how much money they don't spend. The Dodgers have the headline stars, Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, Clayton Kershaw. Throw whoever else you want to in there. Corey Seager, Justin Turner, anybody. Throw who you want in there. They've got them. Versus a team like the Rays that has no stars, that has underappreciated guys like G-Man Choi, who was given up on once upon a time. Randy Arozarena, a young guy who is turning into the best postseason hitter ever, first of all, and a star right in front of our eyes. And then it's anchored by this pitching of Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, and Charlie Morton that has just been incredible. Charlie Morton was phenomenal again in a winner-take-all game. The Dodgers hit 118 home runs in 60 games in the regular season to the Rays hitting just 80. The Dodgers had the second best team average in baseball this season. The Rays had the 21st best. The Dodgers can win a game no matter how many runs they have to score, and the Rays, really, their bread and butter is timely hitting and the pitching, keeping it as a low-scoring game. That's the Rays' bread and butter. Now, I mean, in these playoffs, 4-2 win, 5-2 win, 4-2 win, 2-1 win, 2-1 win, 8-4, 7-5 against the Yankees, 8-2 against the Blue Jays, 3-1 against the Blue Jays. They don't have these big games. No double-digit run games in these playoffs. The Dodgers, on the other hand, in these playoffs, 15-3, 10-2, 12-3, 8-7, 7-3. Two completely different baseball teams. But I'm excited about it because I think it's going to be really close. But we'll see. We're going to talk to Chris Brown about the World Series and about Dodgers Braves coming up next on the JMULL show. We'll ask him about his reactions to Game 7. I'll ask him the same question that I asked myself after the end of this game. Did I feel like the Dodgers went and took this one, or if the Braves left a lot out there? We'll briefly touch on the World Series as well as we get close to the beginning of the World Series. We'll do all of that next on the JMULL show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Monday, twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. When we got big baseball things to talk about, we bring in a guy who knows a lot more about baseball than I do. 110 Sports is Chris Brown. Chris, how you doing?
Doing great, Josh. Thanks for having me on. Always appreciate it. Now we've got a World Series matchup after a wild game last night, like you were talking about.
So after this game, I was torn. And I want to ask you the same question that I was sort of pondering with. After this game, did you feel like the Dodgers went out and won this game, or that the Braves, that the bigger story was the Braves' mistakes that you just can't make against a team like the Dodgers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I'm gonna say a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was sort of the Braves were in the position here. They had the advantage, and then of course, like you talked about earlier in the show, that sloppy defensive, base running mistakes that they made, that you just can't make in Game 7 of the NLCS against a team as good as the Dodgers. You just can't give away, outs. You can't give away opportunities like that. So, on the one hand, that's a big storyline. I mean, that's kind of what it is one thing I'm thinking about this morning. But at the same time, it doesn't matter unless it doesn't really end up hurting them unless the Dodgers capitalize on it.
Right.
And that's what they did. So, the Dodgers with the Kike Hernandez home run, with the Cody Bellinger home run, they were able to capitalize like we know that they're able to do. And, obviously, I think momentum matters. I just would say that, and it's this thing where it all kind of changed for the Braves with those base running problems. I should say. So, it's impossible to know how it would have gone had they handled things differently. It could have been a bigger inning for them. Of course, it could have been they could have scored more runs in that inning, than even what was just on the bases. So it's impossible to know. But I think I guess again, kind of a little bit of a cop-out answer. They blew it. And you have a Dodgers team that stepped up and, showed that those star power that they have with Bellinger, with Kike Hernandez. And so they were able to capitalize on it. It's not a mistake a Braves team can make against a team like the Dodgers.
If you play the first and fourth innings, the top of the first and the top of the fourth innings over 10 times, how many times do the Braves walk away with more than 2 runs? And in the first inning, you had guys on first and second without, after Ozuna drives in Acuna, so you got guys on first and second with no outs, and that turns into a double play and a strikeout to end the inning. And then the top of the fourth, you have guys, nobody out, guys on second and third, and they don't get any runs after that point either. I was genuinely baffled that they only walked away with 1 run in those 2 situations. Of course, Albies had already scored in the top of the fourth, but I mean, those 2 innings I thought were 2 massive turning points, because I felt like they should have walked away with at least 3 runs between those 2 innings, and if not more.
Yeah, I mean, that was it right there for the Braves, because it was. It was hard for me to believe going into this game, and especially as we entered the later innings, that the Dodgers weren't going to be able to score a couple runs. Like this idea that they would just go down, 3-0 or 2-0 seemed pretty unlikely to me. Given the bats that they have and their ability of pretty much anybody in that lineup to hit a home run. So it was one of those things where, like you said, I mean, you have to. If you're the Braves, you can't be content with 1 run. You get into those situations. And, I mean, not that they were content with it, but you can't, when you have that advantage like that, when you have those 2 runners on and no out, when you have that situation, you just have to do better to score 1 run against a Dodgers team that can hit a home run and, at the blink of an eye, and all of a sudden your 1 run is just balanced out, neutralized. So, yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you on that. It's just one of those things where, I think 8 times out of 10, or something like that, 9 times out of 10, they're walking out of those 2 innings combined with 3 or 4 or 5 runs.
Right.
But, it's part of it's bad luck, part of it's good Dodgers pitching, but part of it's just you got to capitalize, and the Braves didn't.
What was the most important decision that Dave Roberts made in this game? Is it not throwing Kershaw? Is it letting Urias go for longer for 3 innings in relief? Is it not putting Kiki Hernandez in earlier in the game for Jock Peterson when he was going up against a left-handed pitcher, and Hernandez, likes hitting off of left-handed pitchers? Was there a decision that Dave Roberts made in this game that sticks out to you? I thought it was a really well-managed game from him. For a guy who is on the hot seat in every way if the Dodgers don't end up winning a World Series, I thought it was a really well-managed game from him.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. It's coming from a manager who's under a lot of pressure and who's been criticized, I think, some fairly, some unfairly, for his pitching decisions in past playoff appearances. And this was one that was really well managed for him. I mean, it certainly didn't get off to a good start with May and Gonsolin both giving up a run or two. But especially down the stretch in this game, and part of it, there's not much you can do about that. But I think the decision for me was letting Julio Urias go 3 innings and not bringing in somebody else for the ninth. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, of course, but I think it's like you talked about. It's one of those things where they had such uncertainty in the ninth inning. Kenley Jansen looks like he might be fixed/better now, but that's one of those things that could change quickly, and he doesn't have a long track record of success this postseason. And then, you could go to Kershaw, you could go to somebody else, but I think that Dave Roberts made the right decision in not overthinking it and not thinking, we got to bring in somebody else. Like, Urias had it going. He had it working for him. He was on a roll. He had that momentum, and I think it made perfect sense for them to stick with him, and it paid off. So that was the move for me that I was like glad. I was a little bit surprised to see, actually pleasantly surprised from the Dodgers' perspective, to see Roberts stick with him, and it paid off.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's not like he was about to face the lineup for a second time necessarily. He had gotten through the meat of the order in the top of the 8th, so it was clearly I like you was surprised that he was on the mound for the 9th inning. I did think it was the right move, though. In a hypothetical Game 7 of the World Series, because there's a way that the Dodgers can do the pitching rotation for the World Series that puts Urias on the mound to start Game 7. Would you rather him start Game 7 or be, he goes Game 4 as a starter, and then you've got him in a situation like this in a Game 7 of the World Series to throw him into 3 innings, middle, late part of these games in Game 7? Would you rather him have the ball to start, or have that luxury of bringing him out of the bullpen if you need him?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal situation, I like what he's done out of the bullpen this postseason, and I like his flexibility because he's a guy who can go out there and get you high leverage outs, but also a guy who can pitch like we saw last night, 3 innings, 4 innings, because he's a starter. He's made 1 start this postseason, 3 out of the bullpen, and he has a 0.56 ERA. I mean, he's just been incredible for them. So I kind of like the idea of, there's a situation in which they need him to start because, they just don't, they've used too many of their guys. But I think in an ideal situation, I'd love to save him if I'm Dave Roberts for, not necessarily, I'm not saying you don't use him in games 4, 5, or 6 or anything to save him, but I like the idea of having him available out of the bullpen in this series for those sort of 3 inning saves or those high leverage get you out of a jam and pitch another inning sort of situations, because that's a situation where he's really thrived this postseason.
Speaking about the World Series, we won't dive too deeply into this. I don't want to put you on any sort of weird situation if you haven't gotten a chance to break down the World Series quite as extensively as you'd like to. But first of all, can you get 2 more different teams than the Rays and the Dodgers? 2 great baseball teams, of course, and I think that was my first takeaway here, is that despite a 60-game season and a weird playoffs, you've still got the 2 best teams in baseball this year playing in the World Series. But they got there in very, very different ways with very, very different makeups. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's a good point because, these are 2 teams who are showing that 2 completely different approaches, 2 completely different styles can be very effective. I mean, like you talked about, the Rays, It's all about the pitching for them for the most part. It's all about quantity of high-level arms. The fact that they don't have to stick with one guy for 6 or 7 innings, one starter, because they've got a huge bullpen of guys who can come in and throw 97, and they know that they've got another 2 or 3 starters who can go out there. Who you're not striving, you're not looking for starting pitching depth. That's what I should be saying. They've got plenty of starting pitching depth, and they've got bullpen depth, and it's all high quality depth. And so they're winning those low scoring games with a couple of big home runs from a couple of players, and they're getting guys that step up out of nowhere like Randy Arozarena and Ji-Man Choi. And then you have the Dodgers, who their star power won out in this series eventually. It didn't look like it would always be that way, but we know what they're capable of. We know what they have. Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, Corey Seager, named NLCS MVP. They have the star power that's winning out for them. And you match that up against a Rays team that a lot of maybe casual baseball fans may be able to only name like a couple of players on that roster.
Right.
Meanwhile, every player on the Dodgers roster is pretty well known for the most part. So it's a really interesting comparison of these two teams with different styles. I can't wait to see how it plays out.
So the World Series that comes to my mind first when thinking about teams that, at least from a money and stars perspective, meeting in the World Series is in 2007 when the Red Sox and the Rockies met, and the Rockies won 90 games that season. The Red Sox won 96, but the Red Sox are the team with, your Dustin Pedroias, your David Ortiz's, Manny Ramirez, Jason Varitek, and against a Rockies team that was similar to the Rays, not necessarily from a team makeup, but just from they're not spending a lot of money. They're not a team that is known for how much money they have. The Red Sox dominated that series. Started off with a 13-1 win, and then it just wasn't too terribly close after that. I personally don't think this is how this series is going to go. Do you think that this will be a series where the team with all the firepower is just clearly a little too much like the Red Sox were in that 2007 World Series, or you think the Rays have the ability to make this a different series?
Yeah, I feel like the Rays starting pitching depth alone is going to make it hard for it to be any sort of a huge blowout for the Dodgers. I certainly could see a game where, look, all the Rays pitchers are, many of them are great, but there's still, obviously an opportunity for the Dodgers to, if their bats keep going, to go off on one of those starters and have a huge offensive game, right, and have a blowout in one of these contests. But I would find it hard to believe that we could see a situation where that happens 2 or 3 times. I could see it happening once or twice, but not a ton. The one thing that does concern me, and one area where I could see if the Dodgers were to sort of run away with this series and win in, let's say 5 games or something like that, it would be from the perspective of the Rays' bats kind of cooling down in that Astros series. They won because they had the timely hits and the pitching, but not a lot of their guys were slumping at the plate. It was Randy Arozarena and then Mike Zunino, and then that's about it. Their batting average in the ALCS wasn't all that great. They've got a bunch of guys who are struggling. They've got a bunch of guys who are capable of turning that around at a moment's notice, but I would be kind of concerned. I think the way that this series could be over quickly and be kind of lopsided is if Arozarena cools off a little bit and Zunino cools off and nobody else sort of gets on track offensively for the Rays, and then all of a sudden, even if their pitching is good, even if the Dodgers are only scoring 3 or 4 runs a game, then if the Rays are only scoring 1 or 2 runs a game, then that's your series right there. Right. So that's the area which I could see it being lopsided, but I certainly not predicting that. I think the Rays pitching is good enough that they're going to be in this thing and make it competitive at least, if nothing else.
Does the fact that the Rays almost choked a 3-0 lead make you feel any differently about the Rays?
A little bit. It's interesting because I think it sort of gave them time to sort of expose some of those flaws that they do have, and in terms of offensively in particular, where this is a Rays team that's shown they're really resilient. It's a fun group of players. I don't think they're gonna come into this series, the World Series, with any sort of like, I don't think they're going to be feeling bad about themselves or doubting themselves because of what happened against the Astros.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm confident that they'll be able to put that behind them. But I do think it exposed a little bit some of their flaws, like the offense that could prove concerning. It showed that they're not, they looked like a really almost a perfect team, I want to say. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but they looked kind of just perfect. It's great. And then we kind of see like, okay, there's holes here too. Like their strategy isn't perfect. It doesn't always work. And so it kind of exposed that. And so I don't think it's not necessarily changing my prediction for the World Series, but I think it's something to keep an eye on. And it's something that shows, look, this could be a lopsided World Series.
And that prediction is?
Dodgers in 6. Dodgers in 6, sticking with the prediction. I don't know if I said it in 6 before, but I'm sticking with the Dodgers to win this, and I'm going with it being 6 games. I think it'll be pretty competitive, but I don't think we're going to need a Game 7. That's my guess.
Well, the thing is, the Dodgers need it to not be a Game 7, because if there is a Game 7, the Rays have Charlie Morton, and that's the best pitcher of all time in that situation.
Yeah.
He's just ridiculously good in winner-take-all games. But I think it's going to be exciting, and can't wait for it to get started tomorrow night. Chris, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming and talking baseball.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. Thanks for having me.
That's Chris Brown at C Brown Sports on Twitter. If you're not following him, you should be following him. He does a really nice job and has done such all post-season. Coming up next, I got some things to talk about with Week 6 of the NFL season. We'll do that next on the JMULL Show, 110sportsmedia.com. Okay, first of all, while I would much rather teams just not have to postpone games due to coronavirus, The fun byproduct here is that we get the Chiefs and the Bills at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday. It's not a bad way to start the week. Chiefs Bills 5 p.m. Eastern today. I mean, that's awesome. It's two of the best teams in the AFC right now. Yes, the Raiders. Yes, the Bills. Yes, have their hiccups, of course. But these are two teams that are going to be hanging around, and I'm sorry, but any team that loses to the Broncos 18-12, they're not competing for anything. Sorry, New England. You'll just have to join the rest of us in our sports fandom in which sometimes our teams aren't great and leave much to be desired. But the Chiefs and Bills, those are two of the best teams in the AFC, and we just get that on a Monday afternoon, and that's, if nothing else, a novelty. I got some Week 6 observations. First, Phillip Rivers did something I didn't think he was capable of. Colts were down 21-0. Leads them back, 21-point second quarter, 371 yards, 3 touchdowns. Sure, it's the Bengals. Sure, you throw all of these things that you want out there, but I was to the point where I wasn't sure the Colts could win a football game in which they were trailing by more than a touchdown. And certainly didn't think they'd have the ability to come back in a game in which they were down 21. Now, listen, part of this has to be, you have to give some respect to the Colts defense. Only 3 points given up in the second half. That's, of course, a big part of this, but the Colts 21-point second quarter. They were down 27-21 at the beginning of the fourth. Go and score 10 points in the fourth quarter. I wasn't sure that Phillip Rivers was capable of that. Now, do we want the Colts to be having to come back from 21? No, I still don't trust Phillip Rivers to that extent. But he is capable of it, and that's something that is a good thing. And clearly the Colts have the capability to do that, even if it's, of course, not ideal. It's one of my worries with the Bears. The Bears are not just lucky. 5-1 is not lucky. But if that defense just has a bad game, if the offense makes a mistake and all of a sudden the defense just can't keep the other team from scoring because it's a defensive touchdown for the other team, and then you find yourself in a little bit of a hole, that's where I worry about the Bears. I mean, 198 yards on 23 passes, a touchdown and interception from Nick Foles just screams game manager, which is fine. It's really, believe me, that's fine. Until they're down and they need to score. And I don't know if you knew, but like outside in Chicago, November and on, isn't exactly a fun time to try and score a lot of points, which in a lot of ways bodes well for the defense, but also if there's an unlucky break, an unlucky bounce, and they end up being down 14-3 for some reason, I really have reservations about their ability to come back in football games with their current situation on the offensive side of the football. Derrick Henry is ridiculous. 22 carries, 212 yards, and a 94-yard touchdown run. Did you see him run away from... I am not breaking any news with this, but he just ran away from defensive backs. Just ran away. It's so unfair that somebody who's 6'3", 250... 6'3", 247. But just so unfair that he's capable of doing that. Are you joking me? He's an absolute monster. Just a monster. And that Titans team might be for real. Not might be. That Titans team is for real. You can't, struggle against the Texans like that, but it still is. It's Deshaun Watson, and while they keep taking his weapons away, but he has to break a tackle at like the 20. I'm watching the clip right now, and and then just runs away from everybody else. He breaks a tackle about the 20-yard mark of the run, and then you've got defensive backs galore just running after him, and nobody can catch him. It's just unfair. It really is unfair in many ways. Firing Dan Quinn looks really good on the Falcons. Matt Ryan, 30 of 40, 371, 4 touchdowns. Defensive backs picked off Kirk Cousins 3 times. Kirk Cousins is he's thrown 123 interceptions this year already. They dominated possession. They had 40 minutes of the possession. Stopped the Vikings on third down. I believe the Vikings were 3 for 10 on third down opportunities. The Falcons, on the other hand, 9 of 17. Tampa Bay. Moving on to Tampa Bay and Green Bay. Green Bay looked silly. I didn't get a chance to watch this football game. I was driving home from somewhere, so I didn't get a chance to watch this football game, but 38-10. Maybe we should, every time Tom Brady enters a game, when somebody tries to talk about how the other team has the better quarterback, and this was not a quarterback duel by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Brady didn't exactly light up the Packers defense, but 38-10. 38-10, and honestly, through 6 weeks of the NFL season, I don't feel all that bad about my prediction for the Bucs to go to the Super Bowl. Don't feel all that bad about it. Don't feel phenomenal about it, but I don't feel all that bad about it. And I definitely don't feel bad about picking them to win that division, because Drew Brees has lost the ability to throw for more than 7 yards through the air. And then finally, my observation comes for a game that hasn't happened yet. That's the Cowboys and Cardinals tonight. I'm really intrigued by what Andy Dalton brings to the Cowboys. I mean, Dak Prescott, horrible ankle injury. And this is not me saying that Andy Dalton's a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. But this is me saying that the Bengals were competitive for a long time with Andy Dalton under center. He's definitely the best backup in the NFL. The Cowboys have a lot of weapons. Andy Dalton was a starting quarterback in this league for quite a while. Put a starting quarterback, a starter caliber quarterback with the weapons that the Cowboys have on offense, and you never know. Now, the Cowboys are not competitive for other reasons, but Andy Dalton being under center is not the worst thing in the world. It's not like you have to put Brian Hoyer under center. I apologize, Brian Hoyer. That was a ricochet shot in its truest form. But I'm curious, very, very curious to see what this football team looks like with Dalton at quarterback, because I don't think it'll be all that horrible. But we'll see. I could be completely wrong. And he could be just terrible, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the case. Coming up next, we'll do some FYI. Get out here on a Monday. You're watching the JMULL Show, twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Game 1, World Series, Tuesday. Only one full day in between the end of the NLCS and the beginning of the World Series. It doesn't completely shock me considering that the Dodgers don't have to move, and I'm guessing that by the end of the game yesterday, if not way before then, the Rays were in Texas already. But pretty quick turnaround. Kershaw will have the ball in Game 1. I'm guessing Glasnow hasn't been officially announced, but Glasnow will probably have the ball in Game 1 for the Rays. And we'll get it rolling. I'm excited about the series. I also want to touch on the Big Ten Conference schedule for this week. Opening weekend in the Big Ten. On Friday night, you got Illinois at number 14, Wisconsin. And then we got some good football games. Not great football games, but we're just gonna get to see some teams, and that's fun. Nebraska, Ohio State. That's the first game on Saturday on Fox. Rutgers, Michigan State, Penn State at Indiana, Iowa at Purdue, and then we got a top 25 matchup: Michigan at Minnesota to start those two teams' season, and then Maryland at Northwestern on the Big Ten Network, starting at 7:30 Eastern as well. Listen. First of all, watching Trevor Lawrence is just a pleasure. I mean, the guy just doesn't. The guy barely does anything wrong. Threw a pick, which is you don't see every day, but 24-32, 404 yards, 5 touchdowns. They were up 52-7 at halftime. Won the game 73-7. He's just so good. It doesn't matter who is the worst team in football and gets the number 1 overall pick. It doesn't matter how recently they drafted a quarterback, and if it's unfair or not that they give up on said quarterback. You got to go get Trevor Lawrence. The guy he's so good. Also, Alabama, they let Georgia hang around for a little while. Clearly, Georgia, it's so weird that this is an Alabama team built on their offense. Matt Jones, 417, 4 touchdowns, 24-32. On the ground, you had Najee Harris rush for 152 yards on 31 carries. And then the Alabama locked in defensively, and Georgia didn't score a point in the second half. Stetson Bennett threw 3 interceptions in the game. And Alabama's just better. I feel bad for Georgia. We have all of these games, and there are some years where Georgia is clearly like the team to go toe-to-toe with Alabama. But this is clearly not the year. The Alabama's just on a different level. And it would be so much fun to watch Clemson and Alabama play. I'd be surprised if that's not the case. Ohio State's up there as well, of course, per usual, and they've got the quarterback to go toe-to-toe with those guys as well. But, in the past, it's kind of been, okay, Alabama, and with Tua, it was a little different, but, that would be just an offensive showdown. It'd be a lot of fun to watch, but Alabama and Clemson asserting their dominance will have Ohio State enter the ring this Saturday and just see how good they are, since, of course, they haven't played yet. But excited for this weekend in football as well as we get the Big Ten returning to college football. And then, of course, tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern, Touchline Talk with Josh Doring, followed by Around the Bases with Chris Brown at 1 p.m. Eastern. He'll break down everything that's got to do with the World Series prior to tomorrow night's first pitch of Game 1. Really excited to tune into that one to see what he has to say about the World Series. I'll be back on Wednesday, same time, 11 a.m. Eastern, per usual, right here, twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. And until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you here on Wednesday.